8 weeks into the war, the Valtharan Empire faced its first existential crisis in 800 years. War Chancellor Vorthak sat in his private quarters aboard the flagship Dominion, staring at reports that made no sense according to everything he had learned about governance and conquest. 3 member species had formally requested meetings to discuss their status in the Empire. That was diplomatic language for potential rebellion. 7 conquered worlds had reduced their tribute payments, claiming economic difficulties. Productivity was down across 43 star systems. Most disturbing of all, his own officers were asking questions about the morality of their mission. The human war had become a galactic disaster, but not in any way the Valtharans had anticipated. On Earth, Colonel Jae Sung was implementing the most unusual military strategy in human history. His forces controlled nothing more than a few underground bunkers beneath the ruins of New Tokyo. But he was broadcasting continuously to every corner of the galaxy. Day 56 of the occupation, he said into his communication device. The aliens control our cities, but they can't control our minds. Every day they spend more resources guarding us than they gain from conquering us. Every day we prove that some victories are more expensive than defeats. His broadcasts were being monitored, not just by other human forces, but by conquered species throughout the Valtharan Empire. The message was spreading. Resistance was possible even after conquest. In the underground tunnels beneath New Tokyo, 10 million humans were conducting an experiment in passive resistance. They followed alien orders but slowly. They worked at alien facilities but inefficiently. They answered alien questions but unhelpfully. "How long can you maintain this resistance?" asked the Valtharan governor of the city, a tall being with pale green skin and 6 arms. "Forever," replied Dr. Minho, the elected representative of the human population. "This isn't an organized resistance that you can break by capturing leaders. Every human here has individually decided that cooperation with your empire is optional. We can force compliance through punishment." "You can kill us," Dr. Minho agreed, "but then you'll have a dead city instead of a productive one. Either way, you lose." The Valtharan governor found himself in an impossible position. Ruling through fear required the threat of something worse than the current situation. But humans had already proven they preferred death to slavery. The usual tools of oppression were useless against people who welcomed martyrdom. Similar situations were developing across human-occupied space. Every alien administrator faced the same problem. How do you govern people who refuse to be governed? Meanwhile, intelligence officer Minji had been analyzing alien communications from her hiding place on the captured research station Discovery. What she found confirmed humanity's darkest suspicions about their enemy. "Admiral," she transmitted to Kyung-ho, "the Valtharan Empire is economically dependent on conquest. They don't just want to rule other species, they need to. Their entire civilization is built on extracting resources and labor from conquered worlds." "What happens if conquest becomes unprofitable?" Kyung-ho asked. "Their empire collapses. They can't sustain their technology and population without constant expansion." This information changed everything about human strategy. They weren't just fighting for their own freedom, they were threatening the economic foundation of galactic civilization. Kyung-ho shared this intelligence with the remaining human commanders. "We're not trying to win a war anymore," he told them. "We're trying to crash an economy." The new strategy was devastatingly simple. Make every human territory as expensive as possible to control. Every captured facility was sabotaged to require constant maintenance. Every human worker produced just enough to avoid punishment, but never enough to be profitable. Every interaction between humans and aliens created problems that required alien resources to solve. Engineer Wu Jin had been perfecting this approach from his cell in a Valtharan prison ship. Despite being captured, he continued his work by teaching other human prisoners how to be the most expensive slaves in galactic history. "The trick is to be helpful," he explained to his fellow prisoners. "Always try to do what they ask, but try very, very badly." Human prisoners across the Empire began implementing this strategy. They volunteered for work assignments, then needed constant supervision. They offered suggestions for improving efficiency, but all their ideas made things worse. They asked thoughtful questions about alien technology that revealed nothing useful, but wasted enormous amounts of time. The psychological impact on Valtharan forces was severe. They had conquered hundreds of species, but none had ever actively tried to be useless. Most conquered populations either fought back or cooperated fully. Humans had invented a third option: cooperative resistance. War Chancellor Vorthak received daily reports about the deteriorating situation throughout his empire. The human strategy was spreading to other conquered species, who were beginning to understand that passive resistance could be more effective than violent rebellion. "Sir," his aide reported, "the Calorian homeworld has announced they're reinterpreting their surrender treaty. They claim they agreed to be conquered, not enslaved." "What's the difference?" Vorthak asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "They're willing to acknowledge Veltharan authority, but they want to negotiate the terms of their participation in the empire." This was unprecedented. No conquered species had ever demanded negotiations after surrender. The very concept challenged the foundation of imperial authority. "How many ships would we need to force full compliance?" "At least 30, sir. For one system." Vorthak calculated the mathematics of empire in his head. 30 ships to control one system. 40% of his fleet tied up fighting humans, growing rebellions on dozens of worlds. The numbers no longer worked. Dr. So Young, now serving as Earth's unofficial ambassador to the galaxy, was broadcasting from a hidden facility in the Australian outback. Her message was specifically directed at conquered species throughout the empire. "You don't have to fight," she said. "You don't have to die. You just have to decide that freedom is worth some inconvenience. Make conquest expensive. Make occupation difficult. Make your conquerors question whether ruling you is worth the effort." Her broadcasts were being translated into hundreds of languages and retransmitted across the galaxy. The response was immediate and dramatic. Species that had been model subjects for centuries began implementing human-style resistance. The Andromedans started arriving late for work assignments. The Centaurians began asking endless questions about regulations they had followed without question for decades. The crystalline Vorthaxi began communicating in their ancient language instead of the imperial standard, forcing their administrators to hire translators. None of these actions were rebellious enough to justify military intervention, but together they created a cascade of administrative problems that paralyzed imperial governance. Admiral Kyung-ho was coordinating this galactic resistance from his command post on New Seoul Station when he received an impossible communication. It was from War Chancellor Vorthak himself. "Admiral Kyung-ho," the alien's mechanical voice said through the translation system, "I wish to discuss terms." "Terms for what?" Kyung-ho replied. "Terms for ending this conflict." Kyung-ho almost laughed. "You mean terms for our surrender?" "No," Vorthak said after a long pause. "Terms for our withdrawal." The silence on the communication channel stretched for several minutes. In 800 years of galactic history, the Veltharan Empire had never withdrawn from a conquest. They had never negotiated with a species they were in the process of conquering. They had never admitted that a military victory could be a strategic defeat. "What do you want from us?" Kyung-ho asked. "I want you to stop," Vorthak replied. "Stop broadcasting to our territories. Stop teaching other species to resist. Stop spreading the idea that conquest can be defeated through non-cooperation. And in exchange, we leave your system. We acknowledge human independence. We never return." Kyung-ho considered the offer. It was everything humanity had fought for, but he sensed there was more at stake than just human freedom. "What about the other species you've conquered?" he asked. "That is not part of these negotiations." "Then there are no negotiations," Kyung-ho said firmly. "We didn't fight just for ourselves. We fought to prove that empire itself is a bad idea. Either you free everyone or we continue showing the galaxy that your empire is built on a lie." The communication ended in silence. War Chancellor Vorthak sat in his command chair, facing the most difficult decision in Veltharan history. He could continue fighting a war that was destroying his empire from within, or he could admit that some species could not be conquered. Either choice would end the empire as it had existed for 8 centuries. The humans had achieved something no military force in galactic history had accomplished. They had made conquest itself obsolete. The war had reached its breaking point, but the real battle was just beginning. The fight was no longer about human survival. It was about the future of freedom in the galaxy. 6 weeks into the war, Intelligence Officer Minji accomplished what should have been impossible. She infiltrated a Veltharan command ship by hiding in the wreckage of a destroyed human vessel. The aliens, confident in their superiority, had grown careless about security. They didn't expect humans to be clever enough for espionage. Minji spent 3 days observing alien operations from inside the ship's ventilation system. What she discovered changed everything humanity thought they knew about their enemy. The Valtheran Empire wasn't held together by military might alone. It was held together by the myth of inevitable victory. For 800 years, no species had ever successfully resisted conquest. This perfect record was what kept the Empire's member species loyal and prevented rebellions. But now that myth was cracking. Minji watched alien officers argue in their command center. Through her translation device, she could hear the strain in their voices. The Calorian rebellion is spreading to 3 more systems, one officer reported. They're demanding independence. Zephyrians have stopped answering our communications. Entirely, said another. And the humans continue to resist despite losing 70% of their territory. The ship's captain, a tall alien with 4 arms and silver skin, looked exhausted. How many ships do we need to maintain control of human space? Currently, sir, 40% of our total fleet. But that number is growing as they implement new resistance tactics. Minji nearly gasped. 40% of the galaxy's most powerful military was tied up fighting humanity's tiny fleet. The humans weren't just fighting. For Earth, they were crippling the Empire's ability to maintain control anywhere else. She managed to access their communication systems and discovered something even more important. The aliens were afraid, not of human weapons or technology, but of human ideas. They were quarantining human broadcasts and forbidding their own people from listening to human transmissions. The human infection spreads through communication, she heard one officer say. They're teaching our subjects that resistance is possible. Minji recorded everything she could, then made her escape by sabotaging the ship's navigation system. As alarms blared throughout the vessel, she ejected herself in a stolen escape pod and transmitted her findings to Admiral Kyung-ho. The Admiral read her report with growing amazement. They're more afraid of our ideas than our weapons, he said to Captain Haijin. What does that mean for our strategy, sir? Kyung-ho smiled for the first time since the war began. It means we stop trying to win battles and start trying to win minds. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. All human forces, this is Admiral Kyung-ho. We're implementing Operation Martyr. Every battle from now on is also a broadcast. Show the galaxy what it means to choose death over slavery. The new strategy was radical even by human standards. Instead of fighting to preserve their forces, human commanders began fighting to create the most inspiring defeats possible. Every last stand became a performance designed to be broadcast across the galaxy. Commander Wu Jin led the defense of the Europa mining station with this new philosophy. When Valtheran forces surrounded the station, he opened communication channels to every conquered world in the Empire. My name is Wu Jin, he said, as alien ships began their final attack. I'm about to die fighting for humanity's freedom. I want you to know that I chose this. No one forced me to fight. No one ordered me to die. I'm doing this because some things are more important than survival. The battle lasted 6 hours. Wu Jin's small force was completely destroyed, but their final transmission reached millions of beings across the galaxy, on 17 different worlds. Productivity stopped as workers gathered around communication devices to listen to humans die for their freedom. Dr. So Young had been studying the psychological impact of these broadcasts from her laboratory on the research station Discovery. Her analysis revealed something extraordinary about human behavior. We're the only species in the galaxy that finds meaning in meaningless sacrifice, she reported to Earth Command. Every other intelligent race evolved past their self-destructive instincts. We kept them, along with something else, the ability to inspire others through our suffering. Her research showed that human resistance was having effects far beyond military strategy. Conquered species were beginning to remember what they had lost when they surrendered. Some were starting to wonder if survival was really worth the price they had paid. The aliens conquered them by offering a rational choice, So Young explained. Submit or die. Every species chose submission because it was logical. But we're showing them there's a third option. Die with meaning. War Chancellor Vorthak was receiving increasingly desperate reports from across his empire. The human war was draining resources faster than conquest could replace them. Worse, the rebellion was spreading to species that had been peaceful subjects for centuries. Sir, his aide reported, The Andromedans are refusing to send workers to the new military shipyards. They say they want to negotiate new terms. Send a fleet to remind them of their obligations. We can't, sir. All available ships are either fighting humans or suppressing rebellions elsewhere. Vorthak realized he was facing an impossible situation. To maintain control of human space, he needed most of his fleet. But maintaining control of human space left him unable to control the rest of his empire. The humans had created a strategic paradox that had no solution. Meanwhile, the human resistance was evolving in ways that defied military logic. Colonel Jae-sung, defending the last human stronghold on Mars, received an order that would have been unthinkable at the start of the war. "Colonel, you're ordered to surrender the base," Admiral Kyung-ho told him. "Sir, surrender it, but don't give up. Show them what occupying human territory actually costs." Jae-sung understood immediately. The humans would become a conquered population that refused to be conquered. They would follow orders just slowly enough to be useless. They would obey regulations just incorrectly enough to cause problems. They would be the most expensive slaves in galactic history. When Veltharan forces took the Mars base, they inherited 10,000 humans who treated occupation as a temporary inconvenience. Every alien patrol faced harassment from civilians. Every alien facility suffered mysterious accidents. The humans didn't fight back directly. They simply refused to function as a conquered people. Their aliens found themselves spending more resources on controlling human civilians than they had spent fighting human soldiers. Every human city became a resource drain. Every human worker produced less than they consumed. The occupation was bankrupting the empire. "They're making conquest economically impossible," Dr. So Young observed. "Even if they lose militarily, they win economically." The most disturbing reports came from the Valtharan Psychological Warfare Division. Human prisoners were somehow converting their guards to question the Empire's methods, not through force or argument but through example. "They accept torture without breaking," one report stated. "They face execution with calm dignity. They treat their captors with pity rather than hatred. This behavior is affecting our personnel in ways we cannot predict or control." War Chancellor Vorthak read these reports with growing unease. His empire was designed to fight enemies who wanted to survive. Against enemies who embraced death, his entire military doctrine was useless. The final straw came when his own crews began asking questions. Veltharan soldiers who had never questioned orders were suddenly wondering why they were fighting beings who posed no threat to anyone except themselves. "Sir," his fleet captain reported, "morale is declining across all units. The troops don't understand why we're fighting enemies who welcome death." "Because they threaten the stability of the Empire," Vorthak replied. "But sir, they're not threatening us with weapons. They're threatening us with ideas." Vorthak paused. In his 3 centuries of service, no subordinate had ever questioned the nature of their enemies. The human infection was spreading even to his own people. Engineer Wu Jin, broadcasting from the ruins of Europa Station, delivered what would become the war's most famous transmission. "You came here to expand your empire. Instead, you've learned that some things can't be conquered, only destroyed. The question is, are you conquerors or exterminators?" That question echoed across the galaxy, forcing every member of the Valtharan Empire to confront an uncomfortable truth. They had built their civilization on the assumption that all intelligent beings valued survival above freedom. Humans had proven that assumption wrong, and in doing so they had exposed the moral emptiness at the heart of galactic civilization. The war was no longer about human survival. It had become about the survival of the very concept of empire itself. 3 weeks into the war, War Chancellor Vorthak faced something he had never encountered in 3 centuries of conquest, an enemy that fought harder when losing. His tactical officers presented daily reports that made no sense according to standard military doctrine. "Sir, the humans have abandoned their main defensive line around Mars," reported his chief strategist. "But they've left behind over 2,000 booby traps and delayed action explosives." "Why would they mine territory they're abandoning?" Vorthak asked. "Unknown, sir. They appear to be making every meter of space dangerous for us to occupy." Vorthak studied the holographic display showing human positions throughout the solar system. Red markers indicated areas under Veltharan control, but each red zone required constant patrols and defensive measures. Instead of gaining territory, his empire was inheriting problems. Meanwhile, Private Taeho found himself captured during the Battle of Mars Station. The young soldier had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission to delay the alien advance. When Veltharan forces finally overran the station, they found him alone in the control room, badly wounded but still alive. The alien interrogation chamber was a sterile white room that hurt Teho's eyes. His captors were tall, thin beings with pale blue skin and large black eyes. They spoke through translation devices that made their voices sound mechanical. "Why do humans choose death over surrender?" the lead interrogator asked. Teho laughed, which seemed to confuse the aliens. "You really don't understand, do you? Explain." "You think this is about winning and losing," Teho said. "But for us, it's about something else. It's about proving that some things can't be conquered, only destroyed." The interrogator's large eyes blinked slowly. "That is irrational. Destroyed things have no value." "Exactly," Teho replied. "That's why you can't win. Every human you kill becomes worthless to you. Every position you capture costs more than it's worth. We're not fighting to win. We're fighting to make winning meaningless." The aliens exchanged glances in their strange way. Teho could see that his words were disturbing them. These beings had built an empire on the assumption that all intelligent species valued survival above everything else. Humans were proving that assumption wrong. "Your species is infected with madness," the interrogator concluded. "Maybe," Teho agreed. "But it's our madness and you can't cure it." That night, Teho escaped by pretending to have a seizure. While the aliens tried to help him, thinking he was dying from his injuries, he managed to access their ship's environmental controls. He couldn't destroy the ship, but he could make life very uncomfortable for everyone aboard. Back on Earth, engineer Wu Jin was working on a completely different approach to the war. Instead of building weapons to win battles, he was designing what he called persistence weapons, devices that wouldn't defeat the aliens but would make them regret every victory. "The idea is simple," he explained to his team in an underground facility beneath Seoul. "We can't match their technology, but we can make our technology annoying." His latest creation was a computer virus that infected alien systems slowly, causing minor malfunctions that got worse over time. Weapons that aimed slightly wrong, life support systems that produced unpleasant odors, communication equipment that randomly played human music. "It won't win the war," Wu Jin admitted. "But imagine trying to run an empire when every captured human facility drives you crazy." The virus was already spreading through alien networks, carried by captured human equipment. Veltharan technicians were reporting strange problems throughout their fleet. Nothing dangerous, just endlessly irritating. Admiral Kyung-ho watched these developments from his command post on New Seoul Station. The human strategy was working, but not in any way that military textbooks would recognize. Instead of defeating the enemy, they were making the enemy defeat themselves. "Sir," Captain Hyojin reported, "we're intercepting alien communications. They're having trouble with their conquered territories." "What kind of trouble?" "Other species are asking questions. They want to know why humans are choosing death over slavery. Some of them are starting to wonder what would happen if they made the same choice." This was the development Kyung-ho had been hoping for. The human resistance wasn't just about Earth. It was about every world the Veltharan Empire had conquered. If other species began to resist, the Empire would face rebellions across hundreds of star systems. Commander Young-soo was defending the asteroid belt mining colonies when he received word that his position was about to be overrun. Instead of attempting a hopeless evacuation, he sent a message that would be broadcast throughout alien space. "To any species listening to this transmission," he said as enemy ships surrounded his tiny outpost, "remember what you're seeing here. We're not dying because we have to. We're dying because we choose to. That choice is available to everyone." The aliens captured the mining station, but Young-soo's message had already spread beyond human space. It was being repeated on worlds the Veltharan Empire had conquered decades ago. Species that had accepted slavery were suddenly remembering what freedom felt like. War Chancellor Vorthak found himself dealing with the first rebellion in his empire's history. The Calorians, a species conquered 50 years earlier, had stopped following orders. They weren't fighting back exactly, but they were no longer cooperating. "Sir," his aide reported, "the Calorian homeworld is refusing to send tribute ships. They say they want to reconsider their position in the Empire. Send a battle fleet to remind them of their obligations," Vorthak ordered. "Yes, sir. But we'll need to withdraw ships from the human front to do it." Vorthak paused. The humans had forced him to spread his forces thin across multiple fronts. Every human position he captured required ongoing resources to maintain. Now other conquered species were causing problems. The empire that had grown through easy conquests was suddenly expensive to maintain. Dr. So-Young was analyzing captured alien technology when she made a disturbing discovery. The Valtharan Empire wasn't just militarily powerful. It was economically dependent on conquest. They needed the resources and labor from conquered worlds to maintain their fleet and support their population. They're not conquerors, she realized. They're parasites. She shared her findings with Admiral Kyung-ho. If we can make conquest unprofitable, their entire empire becomes unsustainable. How do we do that? We've already started. Every human position costs them more to capture and hold than it produces. If other species follow our example, the mathematics of empire stop working. The psychological impact of human resistance was spreading faster than Valtharan forces could contain it. Species across the galaxy were receiving human broadcasts and asking themselves questions they had never considered. What if they had fought back? What if they chose death over slavery? What if saying no was still an option? On the bridge of his flagship, War Chancellor Vorthak stared at reports from across his empire. Productivity was down on 17 conquered worlds. 3 species had stopped paying tribute. Rebellion was spreading like a disease, and the cure seemed to be more expensive than the problem. The humans were losing every battle, but somehow they were winning the war. They had introduced something into galactic civilization that the Valtharan Empire couldn't fight. The idea that some things were worse than death. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving another human broadcast." "What do they want now?" "They're not talking to us, sir. They're talking to our conquered territories." The message was simple, delivered by a wounded human soldier from a burning space station. "We're showing them that no is still an option. Remember that when they come to your world next." Vorthak realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just defending their own freedom. They were attacking the very concept of empire itself. And that attack was working. The war was entering a new phase, one that no military strategist had ever planned for. A conflict where losing battles could win the peace, and where death could be more powerful than victory. The countdown reached 0 at exactly 12:00 p.m. Earth Standard Time. War Chancellor Vorthak sat in his command chair aboard the flagship Dominion, expecting the usual surrender transmission. In 847 previous conquests, the pattern had never varied. First came panic, then desperate attempts at negotiation, and finally submission. Instead, his communication officer looked confused. "Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions from Earth." "Put the surrender message on the main screen," Vorthak ordered. "That's the problem, sir. None of them are surrender messages." The main screen flickered to life, showing a split view of dozens of different human leaders. Presidents, prime ministers, military commanders, and even ordinary citizens were all saying the same thing in different languages. No, not "we need more time" or "let us negotiate." Just no. Vorthak's 4 hands tightened on his chair arms. "This is impossible. Show me their military response." The screen changed to display human space forces. The tiny Earth fleet was powering up weapons and moving into attack formation. Their ships looked like toys compared to Valtharan vessels, but they were clearly preparing to fight. "Sir," said his tactical officer, "their actions don't match any known behavioral pattern. They must understand they cannot win." "Of course they understand," Vorthak replied. "No species is that primitive. They're trying to negotiate from a position of strength. Begin the demonstration." He opened a channel to Luna Base, humanity's largest off-world settlement. "This is War Chancellor Vorthak. You have forced us to demonstrate our power. Surrender now, and no more of your settlements will be destroyed." The response came from Commander Dong-Wu, a middle-aged human with graying hair and tired eyes. "War Chancellor, we understand your message perfectly. We just don't care." Vorthak stared at the screen. In his 3 centuries of military service, no species had ever said they didn't care about survival. "You cannot be serious. We will destroy your entire base." Dongwu nodded calmly. "We know, but we've decided that some things are worse than dying. Being slaves is one of them." "This is madness," Vorthak said. "Your species will go extinct." "Maybe," Dongwu replied. "But we'll go extinct as humans, not as your pets." The communication ended. Vorthak sat in stunned silence for a moment, then gave the order. Destroy Luna Base. The attack lasted 30 seconds. The Valtheran energy weapons turned the human settlement into glowing vapor. 3,000 humans died instantly. It should have been a clear message to the rest of humanity about the cost of resistance. Instead, something unexpected happened. Human communication networks exploded with activity. But it wasn't panic or calls for surrender. It was rage. Captain Hyojin watched the destruction of Luna Base from the bridge of New Seoul Station. Around her, the crew stood in shocked silence. Then someone started speaking in a low, angry voice. Others joined in. Soon the entire bridge was filled with quiet, deadly conversation. Sir, she said to Admiral Kyung-ho, we're receiving reports from Earth. The President is asking for immediate military response. And what do our forces want to do? Kyung-ho asked. They want to attack, sir. All of them. Even though we can't win, Kyung-ho nodded slowly. He had expected this reaction. Humans had always been strange about lost causes. They built monuments to last stands and hopeless battles. They told stories about heroes who died fighting impossible odds. Other species might find this behavior irrational, but it was deeply human. Very well, he said. Signal all ships. Begin Operation Defiance. Dr. So-young was working in her laboratory aboard the research station Discovery when the orders came through. As a xenobiologist, she had been studying fragments of alien technology that had drifted too close to human space in previous years. The aliens' energy weapons and shield systems were decades ahead of anything humans had developed. But she had noticed something interesting. The Valtheran technology was perfectly designed for fighting rational opponents. Their shields assumed enemies would try to preserve their own ships. Their weapons were calibrated to disable rather than destroy, because captured ships had value. They've never fought someone who doesn't care about survival, she muttered to herself. She opened a communication channel to Admiral Kyung-ho. Sir, I have an idea. It's insane, but it might work. At this point, Dr. So-young, insane ideas are all we have left. What if we don't try to win battles? What if we try to make winning meaningless for them? Across the solar system, human forces began implementing tactics that no military academy had ever taught. Ships loaded with nuclear warheads accelerated directly toward alien vessels, making no attempt to survive the attack. The alien shields could stop the explosions, but they couldn't stop the psychological impact. Commander Taeho led the first suicide attack from the Mars defense platform. As his small ship raced toward a massive Valtheran cruiser, he broadcast a message that would be repeated throughout the war. We choose this. Remember that we choose this. The nuclear explosion barely scratched the alien ship's shields, but something changed in the Valtheran fleet. Their communications filled with confused chatter. Officers reported to their superiors that the humans were acting incorrectly. War Chancellor Vorthak found himself facing a completely new kind of warfare. His enemies were attacking without regard for their own survival. They were turning every battle into a mutual destruction scenario. When his forces captured human positions, they found them rigged with explosives and booby traps. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, we've intercepted human communications. They're not trying to win this war. They're trying to make us regret starting it. Vorthak studied the tactical displays. His fleet was winning every engagement, but each victory cost more resources than it gained. Worse, his own crews were beginning to show signs of stress. Fighting enemies who welcomed death was affecting Valtheran morale. What do the psychological profiles say about human behavior? He asked. That's the problem, sir. Their behavior doesn't match any known psychological profile. They appear to be genuinely preferring death to submission. On Earth, the governments were coordinating the most unusual military strategy in history. Instead of trying to save human lives, they were trying to spend them as expensively as possible. Every human soldier was instructed to make their death cost the aliens something valuable. President Kim Min-ho addressed the world from a bunker in Seoul. We may not be able to defeat them, he said, but we can make them understand that conquering humanity will be the worst decision they ever made. The message resonated across human space. Soldiers who would never have volunteered for suicide missions began lining up for assignments that had no chance of survival. Engineers started designing weapons that only worked once but caused maximum damage. Civilians began preparing their cities for sieges that would make occupation impossible. Admiral Kyung-ho received a communication from Earth Command. Admiral, The aliens are requesting negotiations, he almost laughed. Negotiations? After 72 hours? Yes, sir. They want to discuss terms for human surrender. Kyung-ho looked out at the alien fleet. Several ships showed damage from suicide attacks. Their perfect formation had broken up as they tried to defend against enemies who didn't defend themselves. Tell them we'll negotiate, he said, but our terms haven't changed. They leave, or we all die trying to make them leave. The human response to superior force was spreading throughout the solar system like a virus. Instead of rational fear, there was irrational determination. Instead of logical surrender, there was illogical defiance. And somewhere in the depths of space, other conquered species were monitoring human communications and asking themselves a question they had never considered before. What if we had said no? Admiral Kyung-ho stood on the bridge of the orbital station New Seoul, watching the impossible sight through the main viewing window. Alien ships filled the space around Earth like a swarm of angry metal insects. Each ship was 3 times larger than Earth's biggest space station. Their dark surfaces reflected no light, making them look like holes torn in space itself. Sir, we're getting reports from every major city, said Captain Hae-jin, her voice tight with stress. The alien ships are blocking out the sun over New York, London, Tokyo, and Seoul. People are panicking in the streets. Kyung-ho nodded slowly. He had seen many battles in his 30 years of military service, but nothing had prepared him for this. Earth's entire space defense force consisted of 12 small warships and a handful of orbital stations. The alien fleet had over 300 massive vessels. Any word from Earth Command? He asked. There's still an emergency session, Hyejin replied. The president is trying to contact other world leaders, but communication is difficult with those ships interfering with our satellites. A new sound filled the bridge, a low, humming noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The lights flickered and suddenly a massive holographic image appeared in the center of the room. The creature in the image was tall and thin with pale blue skin and 4 arms. Its eyes were large and completely black. Greetings, humans of Earth, the alien said. Its voice was cold and mechanical, coming through hidden speakers. I am War Chancellor Vorthak of the Valtharan Empire. We have come to offer you a choice. Kyung-ho stepped forward even though he knew the alien couldn't see him. Around the bridge, his crew stood frozen, staring at the hologram. Your species is young and primitive, Vorthak continued. You fight with simple weapons and travel in slow ships. We have conquered 847 worlds. Each one chose wisely when faced with our power. The hologram changed, showing images of different alien cities. Beautiful crystal towers reached toward purple skies. Strange creatures that looked like walking trees tended to gardens filled with glowing plants. Underwater cities housed beings that looked like giant jellyfish. These species now live in peace under our protection, Vorthak said. They contribute their knowledge to our empire and share in our prosperity. They are happy. The images changed again. Now they showed destruction. Cities burning. Oceans boiling, entire planets cracking apart like broken eggs. This is what happens to species that choose unwisely. The War Chancellor's voice grew colder. We do not enjoy destruction, but we will not permit defiance. Kyung-ho felt his hands clench into fists. Behind him, he heard someone whisper a prayer in Korean. You have 72 hours to surrender, Vorthak announced. Your leaders must announce complete submission to Valtharan authority. Your military forces must power down their weapons. Your people must prepare for peaceful integration into our empire. The hologram flickered and changed one final time, showing a countdown timer floating in the air. The numbers glowed red in 1:59:58, 71:59:57, 71:59:56. If you do not surrender in 72 hours, we will demonstrate our power by destroying one of your settlements. After that demonstration, you will have 24 more hours to reconsider. If you still refuse, we will begin systematic elimination of your species. The hologram disappeared, leaving the bridge in shocked silence. Captain Hae-jin was the first to speak. Sir, what are our orders? Kyung-ho stared out at the alien fleet. Each ship could probably destroy New Seoul Station with a single shot. Earth's weapons would barely scratch their hulls. By every measure that mattered, humanity had already lost this war before it began. Get me a direct line to Admiral Park on Earth, he said quietly, and patch me through to every human ship and station in the system. While Hyejin worked at her console, Kyung-ho thought about his daughter Mi-young, who lived in Busan with her 2 children. He thought about his elderly parents in their small apartment overlooking the Han River. He thought about every human being on Earth, going about their daily lives while alien warships hung over their heads like swords. "Sir, you're connected to the fleet," Hyejin reported. "Earth Command is also on the line." Kyung-ho activated his communicator. "This is Admiral Kyung-ho to all human forces. You've all seen what we're facing. Command wants our assessment of the situation." Voices crackled through the speakers from ships scattered across the solar system. Captain Dongwu from Luna Base, Commander Taeho from the Mars Station, Lieutenant So-young from the asteroid mining platforms, all of them reporting the same thing. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely surrounded. "What's the tactical recommendation?" asked Admiral Park from Earth. Kyung-ho closed his eyes for a moment. In all his years of military service, he had never faced a situation where surrender was the only logical choice. The aliens were right. Humanity's weapons were primitive compared to theirs. Resistance would mean the extinction of the human race. But something deep in his chest rebelled against that logic. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was something uniquely human that the aliens, for all their advanced technology, couldn't understand. "Admiral Park," he said slowly. "With respect, sir, tactical recommendations assume we're trying to win. But what if winning isn't the point?" There was silence on the communication channel. Then Admiral Park's voice came through, uncertain. "Explain." "They've conquered 847 worlds," Kyung-ho said. "Every single one surrendered when faced with superior force. It was the logical choice. But humans, we've never been entirely logical, have we?" He paused, looking out at the alien fleet again. "Maybe that's our advantage. Maybe that's the only thing they can't plan for." "Admiral," Captain Hyejin said quietly, "the countdown is at 71 hours and 53 minutes. Kyung-ho nodded. "Patch me through to every communication satellite still working. I want to talk to Earth." A few minutes later, his voice was being broadcast to every television, radio, and internet connection on the planet. "Citizens of Earth," he began, "we face a choice. We can surrender and live as subjects of an alien empire, or we can fight and probably die as free humans. The logical choice is obvious." He paused, watching the alien ships through the window. "But since when have humans ever been logical?